Jimmy popping all that bullshit. I be seeing you, Jimmy, talking about we Gucci boo boo. He in the Gucci store. Talking about we Gucci boo boo. Them Black King was going up. Jimmy like, Marita Moneda. Coca-Cola.
It sounds like he want to do one with 50 Cent. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Jim.
Nah, I don't want to do nothing with that sucker. You heard? Leave him out of the conversation.
Jim Jones. Who is Jim Jones? Like, he's not on anyone's top 10 list. He's not like no one's top 10 list. Maybe not even his family.
When Jay did the remix, it was the biggest alley-oop he could do for me. I understood a lot about music, and at that time, people were looking at the wrong way, and I was looking at the right way.
50 Cent just went off on Jim Jones for talking slick about Nas. And to make it even wilder, 50 dropped some rare footage showing how Jim totally switched up on JayZ, first calling him soft, and then later begging for a Roc Nation deal. See, 50 never really rocked with Jim or Jay, but he got big respect for Nas. So when Jim started talking crazy, saying he was better than Nas, and claiming he made Nas go viral again, 50 took that to heart. What 50 just put out there ain't just about Jim throwing shade at Nas. It's about Jim's long track record of switching sides and moving like a snake. Jim been playing both sides for years, acting tough one minute and then begging for a cosign the next, especially when it comes to JayZ. Check this out. Jim spent more than 10 years throwing jabs at Jay, and he even smacked one of Jay's execs. But when Jim needed that deal, he came crawling back to Jay, calling him a hero and straight up begging to get signed. Now 50 is putting all this on blast to show everyone who Jim really is. A dude with no loyalty, no backbone, and no respect for the culture he says he loves. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Jim's disrespect toward Nas ended up blowing up in his face because it gave folks like 50 a reason to dig into his messy history and expose every shady move.
Certain people shouldn't be able to say your names until they've done something in the genre of music. I've done too much in this music to even have to answer that question. Like Jim Jones, who is Jim Jones?
So let's really look at how Jim went from throwing shots at Jay to bowing down and kissing the ring. We all know 50 Cent don't hold back when it comes to exposing fake vibes. His latest comments calling Jim JayZ's lapdog after he came at Nas just proves Jim been flip-flopping like crazy. In case you didn't catch it, Jim really had the nerve to claim he's better than Nas. He even got into it with Shannon Sharpe, talking about how he could run circles around Nas in the booth. Like, seriously? Jim out here flexing around Nas right now like he's untouchable. Everybody sees it. A ton of rappers stepped up and checked Jim for saying he's nicer than Nas, but Jim didn't back down. He doubled down. He even bragged, saying he made Nas relevant again for the first time since that beef with JayZ. That's wild talk. And since Jim brought JayZ into it, you already know 50 Cent had to jump in and air Jim out. 50 pulled up with an old clip of Jim at Roc Nation headquarters, cheesing hard like a fanboy. In the caption, 50 threw a heavy jab at Jim, saying, "Someone asked me if I have more enemies than friends. I thought about it and said, yes, poor me. I'm suffering from success, LOL." You might think 50 was just clowning for fun, but if you know the deep history between Jim and JayZ, that post hits way harder. Jim spent a wild 13 years going at JayZ, throwing public shots, dropping diss tracks, and even getting into street beefs. But when he needed that cosign, Jim switched up fast. He went from talking reckless to straight up begging for Jay's approval. That's 50's whole point. Jim's recent Nas disrespect ain't just reckless, it's about to blow up in his face. It dragged all his old shady moves right back into the light.
More influential than Nas, and I don't care what nobody say. I know I made a little boo-boo when you talk about the sales and all this type. I don't feel like getting into that rhetoric about where I started and where he started.
Well, you said that.
But listen, Nas was nice when I was in high school. When I was in 10th grade, Nas came out. Nas was dope. We appreciated him. He had a little bit run. But Nas always came up second to Jay and DMX and all these other people.
But lyrically, I'm gonna keep it a stack with you.
Yeah,
y'all
but look how you dress. Look how you dress. You don't even be in the same places I be in.
I can be in the church house. You can't ever Nas lyrics. I don't know who told you that. Now look, I know you on that good stuff, but you're not seeing Nas. You're not seeing Nas, bro. Let's be real.
You got a bunch of 40 and 50-year-olds in their panties because I said I'm better than Nas.
It don't matter.
Look at you.
Hey,
I will run circles around Nas rapping right. I will run circles around Nas rapping right now. Right now, I will run Saturn around Nas right now rapping. Everybody knows that.
But hold up. How did Jim go from dissing Jay and slapping one of Jay's execs to hugging it out and begging for that Roc Nation deal? To begging Jay to sign him, let's take it all the way back. It kicked off in 2002 when Cameron and Jim Jones got brought into Rockefeller by Dame Dash. Jim even claimed Cam was promised a vice president role at Rockefeller, but JayZ never said that out loud to the public. Cam later told the source he wasn't even sure if he wanted that role yet. He said, "Me and Dame are still talking about it, but I mean, I can have it. It's mine." But Jay didn't exactly co-sign that. He told the source that it wasn't official yet, saying, "That's not taking effect as of yet. I think the talk is a little premature right now." So from the jump, there was tension in the building. Then Jay hopped on the remix of Cam and Juelz Santana's smash hit Oh Boy and dropped a verse dissing Nas. But Cam and Jim straight up refused to release that remix. Cam even erased Jay's verse, later saying he wasn't about to let Jay hijack their song just to settle his personal beef. That right there set the stage for years of drama. Jim and Cam felt like Jay never respected them, and that's when the sneak disses started flying. Jim started popping up in interviews and on the radio, throwing shots at Jay, calling him out for being out of touch with the streets, too corporate, too polished.
Ever, he's never been talked about like this ever in his life.
Now, has Nas reached out to you?
You did. The last time he was in some this when people were comparing when him and Jay was beating on him. You heard?
Jim really wanted to push the narrative that Dipset was wild, flashy, and raw, while Jay was all about the suits and boardrooms. Jim leaned heavy into that energy, claiming the streets had already left Jay in the dust. At first, Jay didn't clap back directly. He stayed quiet, but everybody could feel the tension bubbling inside Rockefeller. Fast forward to 2006, Jim dropped We Fly High and had the whole world yelling "Ballin'." That song turned into a straight-up anthem and finally gave Jim a huge solo hit. That's when Jay knew he had to step in and make a move. He came out with Brooklyn High, a remix using Jim's own beat. But don't get it twisted, it wasn't no tribute. It was a straight diss. Jay tore into Jim's whole style, clowning his bars, mocking his ad-libs, and making him look small. It was cold, sharp, and straight disrespectful. Jim wasn't gonna let that slide, though. He fired right back with the beef mix, flipping the beat again and going right at Jay's neck, calling him old, out of touch, and saying he was too weak for the streets. But that's when things went from rap to real life. In 2008, Jim got caught on security cameras throwing hands at somebody inside a Louis Vuitton store. Later, it came out that the guy was JayZ's longtime A&R, Lenny Santiago. Jim ended up getting arrested and later pled guilty to misdemeanor assault. That move turned the whole beef super personal. Jay kept his cool in public and didn't say nothing about it at first, but behind the scenes, everybody knew it was up. Later that year, Jay did an interview with XXL talking about where rap was heading, and he used it as a chance to take slick shots at Jim. Jay said, "I mean like Jim Jones, for example, and I don't mean this because we never see eye to eye. He made nah, 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 nah. What's the difference between smiley face songs and Soulja Boy and nah, 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 nah? Nah, 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 nah could have been called smiley face. So now you got Jay sending strategic shots, calling Jim's music corny and blaming it for ruining the culture. This wasn't just rap beef no more, it was a full-on chess game. Maybe Jay wasn't out in the streets throwing hands, but he knew exactly how to clown Jim without even breaking a sweat. From there, the beef cooled down and turned into a silent war. Between 2010 and 2015, there wasn't no diss tracks or street fights, just that heavy, awkward tension sitting in the air. Then in 2015, Dipset tried to light that fire again. They dropped a freestyle over Diddy's Victory beat. Cam and Jim both went off, throwing shade at Jay and Roc Nation, mocking that whole fancy brunch scene. They called the label industry puppets, and even dragged Beyoncé into it. Cam spit lines like, "Having money don't make you a real one. You step on the court, you gon' play my game. Just take Shawty's advice and say my name. They really thought they were about to pull Jay back into the mud. But by then, Jay was on a whole different level. The man was a billionaire, married to Beyoncé, collecting million-dollar art pieces, building up Tidal, and running sports deals. He wasn't checking for Jim and Cam still hollering from the bleachers. Matter of fact, a clip popped back up where Jay compared himself to Michael Jordan, saying Jim was like that 8th guy on the bench yelling at the MVP. That stung hard. That's when it finally hit Jim. He was just making a fool out of himself trying to beef with Jay. So what did he do? Exactly what 50 Cent is roasting him for right now? Jim did a total 180 and started begging Jay to bring him into the Roc Nation family. And in February 2017, after over a decade of throwing shots and wild disrespect, Jim finally signed that deal with Roc Nation. After 13 years of barking, he ended up folding and putting his name on that contract. Jim officially joined Jay's team, but he didn't just slide in low-key. He started straight flexing about getting that golden invite to Jay's Roc Nation brunch, the same fancy event he used to diss Heavy. Suddenly, he was out here praising Jay every chance he got, moving like the biggest fan in the world. Jim was doing the absolute most to show love and prove he was down for Jay now. This the same dude who used to call Jay soft, accuse him of turning his back on the streets, and even put hands on Jay's homie. Now he's talking about how Jay was always his role model and acting like he'd been a loyal supporter all along. Wild. Meanwhile, Jay, he stayed on his cool boss vibes. No big public shout-out welcoming Jim to Roc Nation, no warm speech, no hype video. There's literally just one photo of them together after Jim signed that deal. And even in that pic, Jay looking like he can't wait to dip. Jim finally got to sit at the table he'd been barking about for years. But Jay made it crystal clear they weren't equals and never would be. Jim was just another name on the Roc Nation roster, nothing more. What's crazy is that for over a decade, from 2002 to 2017, Jim built a whole image off not needing Jay, bragging that he was standing alone, not in Jay's shadow. And in the end, he folded and signed right up. Jim tried so hard to paint Dipset as the street alternative to Roc Nation, the raw, real squad standing against Jay's polished corporate empire. But at the end of the day, the money called louder than the streets. The tough image Jim spent over a decade building crumbled the second he needed that deal. Jay didn't have to drop a diss track, didn't have to fire back at interviews. He just waited in silence. And when Jim finally bent the knee, Jay sat down, signed the paperwork, and went right back to business like nothing happened. And that's exactly what 50 Cent been saying. Jim ran his mouth for years, throwing shots at Jay, trying to act above it all. But in the end, he was the one begging for a spot at that Roc Nation table. Most folks probably would have let all this fade into the past if Jim hadn't stepped out of line and disrespected NASA's legacy. But when he did that, he handed people like 50 the perfect chance to dig deep and drag out every shady move from his past. All those receipts? Way too heavy to ignore now. So now the big question is, how far is this fallout gonna go? Can Jim's career bounce back from this brutal exposure, or is this the last page in his book?